Yeah, you staged it! You staged it! Staged it! You staged it!
The meltdown has begun. Westminster is shaking and Keir Starmer is standing right at the centre of the storm. Richard Tice has unleashed a political bombshell so devastating that the Labour leader and his allies in the Liberal Democrats never saw it coming. In one bold, ruthless stroke, Reform UK has turned Britain's immigration crisis into a weapon, one now being aimed directly at the councils who once demanded open borders. No more empty promises, no more grand speeches. Richard Tice has flipped the script and forced the Labour Party, the Lib Dems and the Greens to face the very consequences they pushed onto everyone else. And the message is crystal clear. If you campaigned for it, if you cheered for it, if you wave the banners, then you can deal with it. This is no longer just politics. This is a war for the future of Britain, and Keir Starmer is already losing control. The shock came within minutes of Reform UK's announcement. Richard Tice, armed with new local council victories, declared that migrants would no longer be dumped into working-class towns that never consented to such placements. Instead, they would be redirected to Labour and Liberal Democrat strongholds, the very same councils that lobbied for asylum hotels, refugee banners, and open-door immigration. The strategy hit like an earthquake, tearing through the carefully crafted image of Labour as the party of order and compassion. In truth, they had long relied on poorer, voiceless communities to shoulder the costs of their ideology. But now the tables are turned. And for the first time, Labour is being forced to live under the policies it once imposed on others. The silence from Starmer was immediate and deafening. No fiery defence, no counter-attack, just panic and confusion behind closed doors. Richard Tice's move was not just bold, it was surgical. Reform UK's legal teams had already prepared the paperwork. Council leaders aligned with Reform began blocking Home Office placements in their towns and redirecting them into Labour-run cities. It was precise, calculated, and impossible to ignore. The timing was brutal. Labour had barely recovered from weeks of internal chaos when this new blow landed on their doorstep. Suddenly, pro-migrant councils found themselves trapped. They had boasted of inclusivity, demanded compassion, and waved the flags of diversity. But now, with real migrant relocations heading their way, they were scrambling to find excuses. The hypocrisy was exposed in real time and the public saw it instantly. Communities that had been silenced for years erupted with support for reform. Finally, someone is fighting back became the rallying cry spreading across pubs, schools and council estates. Inside Labour HQ, the meltdown grew worse. Reports leaked that Starmer had convened an emergency meeting with senior Labour figures. Furious councillors from pro-migrant regions accused the leadership of abandoning them. They had never expected to actually take responsibility for the migrants they welcomed in theory. The backlash was immediate. Angry residents began protesting outside local offices, demanding answers. Labour officials, once confident in their rhetoric, now faced hostile questions. Why are migrants coming here? Why were we never asked? Why is Reform UK leading while Labour hides? The party of supposed leadership looked weak, cornered and utterly unprepared. Every hour of silence made them appear more complicit, more hypocritical and more detached from the people they claimed to represent. Meanwhile, Richard Tice pressed the attack. His words were sharp, unapologetic and designed to cut through the noise. If you voted for it, you can live with it. It was more than a statement. It was a declaration of war against the political establishment. Reform UK had seized the immigration narrative and flipped it upside down. No longer could Labour and the Lib Dems hide behind distant moralising. Now their own communities were becoming the battlegrounds. Like a political chess master, Tice had moved his pieces in perfect sequence, cornering his opponents before they even realised the game had begun. And lurking in the shadows was Nigel Farage, quietly guiding, advising and preparing for the next strike. His presence alone terrified Westminster. Everyone knew the moment Farage officially returned, the movement would explode even further. The media struggled to contain the story. Left-leaning outlets tried to frame Reform UK's policy as cruel and heartless, but the attacks fell flat. Ordinary Britons had heard enough empty moral lectures. They had watched their towns hollowed out, their services stretched thin, and their voices ignored. For them, Reform's stance wasn't cruel, it was common sense. Social media platforms lit up with clips of Richard Tice delivering his message, with citizens cheering outside hotels and with angry Labour voters demanding accountability. A grassroots uprising was unfolding in real time, and the establishment was powerless to stop it. The pressure on Starmer was unbearable. He had promised stability, competence, and control. Yet here he was, blindsided by a rival party that outmanoeuvred him at every turn. His advisors whispered a strategy, but strategy required leadership. And leadership was exactly what Starmer could not provide. Each delay, each silence, each stumble only deepened the sense of collapse inside Labour. The once calm image of Starmer as the alternative to Tory chaos was shattered. He now looked indecisive, unprepared and weak. And Reform UK knew it. Their leaders were not playing defence anymore. They were on the offensive, launching a political war with no intention of slowing down. They had drawn the battle lines and forced Labour and the Lib Dems into a trap of their own making. Britain was no longer watching a debate. Britain was watching a reckoning. And as Richard Tice stood at the centre of it all, the message was clear. The age of silence was over and the fight for Britain's future had just begun. The shockwaves are spreading faster than anyone in Westminster can control. What began as a single council-level manoeuvre is now spiralling into a nationwide confrontation that threatens to tear the political establishment apart. Richard Tice and Reform UK have not only cornered Labour and the Lib Dems, they have exposed the entire system for what it is. A house of cards built on hypocrisy. Councils that once begged for more migrants, safe in the belief they would never have to host them, are now watching busloads heading directly toward their doorsteps. The outrage is growing louder by the day, and the silence from Starmer is making it worse. Instead of strength, he projects weakness. Instead of clarity, he offers confusion. And every moment he hesitates, Reform UK grows stronger. Inside Labour's ranks, the meltdown is reaching a breaking point. Local councillors in pro-migrant regions are furious. They accuse the national leadership of betraying them, of leaving them exposed to the anger of their own voters. These councillors once waved banners of refugees welcome at conferences and council meetings. But when Reform UK's plan turned slogans into reality, they were blindsided. Constituents flooded their offices demanding answers. Why now? Why here? Why is Labour hiding? And there were no answers, only panic. Some councillors whispered to journalists off the record, admitting they were unprepared and even considering breaking ranks. This rebellion inside Labour is small but growing, and Starmer's inability to stamp it out is only fueling the crisis. The Liberal Democrats are in no better shape. Ed Davey's party, long known for sanctimonious speeches about compassion, suddenly finds its councils being named as new destinations for redirected migrants. The irony is brutal. For years, Lib Dem leaders accused other parties of cruelty, insisting Britain could take more migrants without consequence. Now their own voters are facing that consequence head on, and they are not happy. Leaflets have been distributed across Lib Dem-controlled areas warning of incoming relocations. Protests are forming outside council buildings. Angry voters are confronting their representatives, demanding to know why their communities should bear the costs of policies crafted by elites who never asked their consent. The Lib Dems, once proud of their moral stance, are now scrambling for cover. The Greens, too, are feeling the heat. Their calls for borderless compassion sounded noble when they were just words. But when Reform UK redirected migrants toward Green-run enclaves, the reality struck. Suddenly, the slogans collapsed under the weight of public outrage. Environmental campaigns and climate protests are being drowned out by furious residents asking why their neighbourhoods are being targeted for mass resettlements. The Greens, once untouchable in their progressive bubble, now look like amateurs caught in a storm they never prepared for. And Richard Tice is making sure every party pays the price for years of virtue signalling. But this isn't just about party politics, this is about power, and Reform UK is proving it can wield it with precision. Legal teams are launching preemptive strikes against the Home Office, ensuring that Reform-controlled councils cannot be forced to host migrants against their will. At the same time, they are preparing lawsuits to redirect the pressure onto pro-migrant councils. It is a two-pronged attack. Defend their own communities while forcing the burden onto those who demanded it. The brilliance of the strategy lies in its simplicity. For decades, Britain's establishment relied on working-class towns to absorb the costs of mass immigration. Reform has shattered that pattern. Now the elites are being dragged out of their safe bubbles and forced to confront the chaos they created. The media can't keep up. Mainstream outlets like the BBC, The Guardian and The Independent are running frantic pieces condemning Reform's policy as dangerous and inhumane. But their voices are falling flat. The public has stopped listening. Years of spin and censorship have left ordinary people numb to elite lectures. Instead, they are turning to alternative outlets, to social media and to Reform itself for answers. Videos of Tice's interviews are going viral. Nigel Farage's warnings are being replayed across platforms. Citizens are uploading their own footage. Protests outside asylum hotels, angry council meetings, packed town halls demanding reform. The establishment narrative is collapsing under the sheer weight of grassroots reality. And all the while, Nigel Farage's shadow looms larger. Though he has not formally returned to frontline politics, his fingerprints are everywhere, advising Tice, shaping the messaging, guiding the legal framing. Farage is acting as the strategist in the shadows. To the elites, this is terrifying. They know that if Farage officially steps back into the spotlight, Reform will explode into a full-scale national force. The mere possibility is enough to send Westminster into a panic. Every whispered rumour of his return sends journalists chasing for confirmation. Every public appearance by Farage adds fuel to the fire. Reform's rise feels unstoppable, and the establishment knows it. Keir Starmer, once hailed as the steady alternative to Tory chaos, is now caught in his own nightmare. He is trapped. If he defends Labour's pro-migrant legacy, he alienates voters in working-class areas who are already furious. If he pivots and criticises immigration, he looks weak and unprincipled, a leader with no conviction. Either path is political suicide, and Reform has forced him into this impossible corner. Behind closed doors, Labour insiders admit they have lost control of the narrative. They thought they could quietly manage immigration while silencing critics. Instead, Richard Tice has turned their greatest weakness into a weapon, and it is cutting them to pieces. The Conservative Party, meanwhile, is collapsing under its own failures. After years of tough talk and empty promises, the Tories now find themselves exposed as frauds. Their Rwanda scheme failed. Their border controls crumbled. Their endless rhetoric about taking back control also never delivered results. And now Reform UK has seized the mantle. Voters are asking a simple but devastating question. What's the point of the Conservatives if they act just like Labour when it counts? Grassroots defections are already happening. Former Tory councillors are resigning and joining Reform. Whispers of MPs considering defection are growing louder. The Tory party, once the natural home of Britain's nationalist vote, is being hollowed out from within. Across the country, the people are responding. Protests are swelling. Communities that felt ignored for years are finally rising with a sense of power. Reform's offices are overwhelmed with new volunteers, donations, and candidates willing to stand in the next election. For the first time in decades, ordinary Britons feel they have a party that speaks for them. The establishment may sneer, but the momentum is undeniable. This is no longer just a policy debate. This is a national uprising. The old political order is crumbling, and Richard Tice has lit the fuse. And now the cracks in Keir Starmer's carefully built political facade are beginning to split wide open. What once looked like control is now spiralling into chaos. And the Reform Party's surge under Richard Tice has turned every Labour promise into a ticking time bomb. Just days ago, Starmer stood tall, speaking of unity, fairness and stability. But today, that image has collapsed. Across the country, Labour-run councils are on the brink of disaster as Richard Tice moves fast, unloading the migrant crisis directly onto their doorstep. For years, Labour and their allies in the Liberal Democrats lectured Britain about compassion, about welcoming all, about moral duty. But when Tice called their bluff and handed them the very responsibility they preached, the reality hit harder than anyone imagined. Communities already stretched thin are now erupting in anger. Local leaders are panicking. And Starmer, he's running out of places to hide. What makes this moment even more devastating for Labour is that it was entirely predictable. The party ignored the warnings for years, dismissing the frustration of working class voters who felt abandoned, unheard and betrayed. Reform UK tapped into that pain, gave it a voice, and today that voice is louder than ever. Starmer is being cornered in Parliament, exposed in the media and openly mocked by his opponents who are calling this the beginning of the end for his leadership. The optics are brutal. A Prime Minister who looks weak, a party that looks divided and a country that feels betrayed. And through it all, Richard Tice is hammering the same message. Labour must live with the consequences of its own policies. The backlash is no longer confined to voters. It has reached the very heart of Labour itself. Reports are emerging of MPs clashing behind closed doors, shouting matches erupting as council leaders beg the party leadership for help. Some are even threatening to resign, claiming they cannot carry the political burden being forced upon them. Leaks suggest that senior Labour figures fear an outright rebellion in the coming weeks. One that could tear the party apart before it even settles into government. In the shadows, whispers of a leadership challenge grow louder. Could Starmer's premiership really collapse this quickly? Could Labour's historic victory turn into one of the shortest-lived governments in modern British history? Meanwhile, the British public is seething. Videos of council meetings descending into chaos are flooding social media. Angry residents demanding answers, shouting down officials and vowing to vote reform in the next election cycle. Ordinary people are asking the simplest but most devastating question of all. Why is our community paying the price for Labour's failures? Starmer's attempts to spin the crisis are failing because people can see the truth with their own eyes. Streets are overcrowded, services are buckling and trust is collapsing. What once was dismissed as a reform talking point has now become a reality that no amount of Labour PR can cover up. The international dimension makes it worse. The EU, already watching Britain closely, sees a government in chaos. European leaders whisper that Britain looks weak, unstable and directionless under Starmer. At home, the press is feasting on every misstep, with headlines declaring the government's meltdown. Even traditionally Labour-leaning outlets can no longer deny the scale of the disaster. The narrative has flipped completely. Labour is no longer the party of control, but the party of collapse. And Richard Tice, he is relishing every second. Standing before Reform supporters, he declares this is just the beginning. His bold gamble to directly confront Labour with the migrant crisis has paid off beyond expectation. He has not only humiliated Starmer, but also carved out a permanent place for Reform as the true opposition. The message is clear. Labour may have won the election, but Reform is winning the country. Starmer is trapped between a furious public rebellious MPs and a rising Reform movement that shows no sign of slowing down. The longer this chaos continues, the more it feels like Britain is heading toward an unstoppable political earthquake, one that could sweep away not just Starmer, but the entire Labour establishment with him. And now Britain watches in stunned silence as the unthinkable begins to unfold. The Starmer government, once hailed as the great hope for national unity, is now being torn apart from the inside. What began as a bold move by Richard Tice has escalated into a full-scale political crisis, one that threatens to bring down the entire Labour establishment in real time. The Reform Party's gamble to throw the migrant issue back onto Labour councils wasn't just a headline stunt. It was a calculated strike at the heart of Labour's identity. And now, with every passing hour, the cracks are widening. Across the nation, council chambers are collapsing into scenes of open rebellion. Local Labour leaders, once loyal foot soldiers for Starmer, are breaking ranks, openly defying the party line and demanding immediate action. They're warning of riots, financial collapse and total loss of public trust. And yet, in Downing Street, Starmer sits surrounded by panicked advisers, unsure whether to double down or surrender. The man who once promised steady hands now looks like a captain watching his ship sink, powerless to stop the water pouring in from all sides. Behind closed doors, Labour MPs are turning on each other like never before. Meetings have erupted into shouting matches. Some MPs accuse Starmer of betraying the working class. Others blame his inner circle for being out of touch with reality. Leaked emails reveal fury from council leaders who say they were blindsided by the influx of migrants. "We begged for support," one furious councillor wrote, "and instead we were hung out to dry." Placeholder are even calling for emergency resignations within the cabinet. It's no longer just a crisis, it's a mutiny. And it's spreading fast. Senior party strategists are terrified that if they don't stop the bleeding, they'll face a full-scale leadership challenge before the year is out. And in the shadows, ambitious Labour figures are already positioning themselves as potential successors. The knives are out and everyone knows it. Meanwhile, the Reform Party is on the offensive like never before. Richard Tice is everywhere, on TV, in Parliament, on the streets, hammering the same message. Labour created this crisis and now they must live with it. His speeches are going viral. His rallies are growing larger by the day. And for the first time in decades, a party outside the establishment looks like it could seriously reshape the future of British politics. Reform supporters are energised, emboldened and furious. They see themselves as the only ones speaking for the people, and they're using every ounce of this chaos to push their message further. "This isn't a protest vote anymore," Tice declared in a fiery address. "This is a movement to take our country back, and it's working." Poll after poll shows Labour's support collapsing in key regions. Constituencies that were once safe are now swinging hard toward reform, and Starmer knows it. In a desperate attempt to regain control, Starmer has begun quietly reaching out to senior Lib Dem and Green leaders, hoping to form a united front. But even that strategy is falling apart. The Liberal Democrats are furious that they too are being forced to absorb the consequences of a crisis they didn't create. Green leaders are publicly distancing themselves, warning their base that they won't be dragged into Labour's sinking ship. Starmer is running out of allies. Even the unions, long the backbone of Labour's strength, are now warning that they may withdraw support unless immediate action is taken to resolve the crisis. The pressure is suffocating. The government is on the edge of collapse. And then comes the most shocking development of all. Rumours begin to swirl that the royal household is deeply concerned about the growing instability. While the palace remains officially neutral, sources suggest senior royals are quietly pressing for urgent stability behind the scenes. It's a constitutional whisper, but it carries weight. Britain's institutions are now waking up to the fact that this isn't just a political mess, it's a national emergency. And through it all, Keir Starmer stands isolated, a leader surrounded by enemies, watching the dream of his government disintegrate before his eyes. The question now isn't just whether Labour can recover, it's whether Starmer can survive the week. And if he falls, what rises in his place? The people are angry, reform is rising, and the British establishment is facing a storm it can no longer control. This isn't politics as usual, this is war.